They told her not to look back as they lowered him into the earth, but her eyes betrayed her heart. The wind that day was cold, sharper than the winter that hovered in the bones of that old cemetery on the outskirts of town. She wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders, but it did nothing to guard her against the chill that settled deep in her lungs. They stood in a line like solemn sentinels, heads bowed, tears frozen by the frigid air. Her mother wept quietly beside her shoulders shaking like brittle branches weighed down by snow. Her father refused to speak. The minister gave a hushed prayer, comforting for those with faith, hollow for those whose hearts were already shattered. And when the final shovelfuls of earth covered the coffin, they turned to her with sharp, impatient eyes. "We must go," her uncle said, his voice thin and hurried. "There's no time to linger." But she tried to speak, but a sob lodged in her throat like a stone. "No," he said, firm and resolute. "It's done. Come inside. Warm yourself." Inside. The word echoed in her mind like a cruel joke. Warm. Firelight. Voices. Food. Laughter. All things that now felt alien to her heart. They moved her gently but firmly, like one moves a wounded animal that doesn't realize it needs help. And she let them lead her away from the grave, from him, from the last chance to say goodbye. She asked later, after days turned into weeks, why she was not allowed to stay. Why they insisted on rushing her away. Why they refused her that final moment. Her mother said it was out of kindness, that the sight would break her. Her father said he was wrong, but that his silence was protection. But she knew the truth. Some wounds are too sharp to look at, and some grief was easier to bury than to witness. 4 years passed, and grief became a quiet companion, less screaming, more a weight she carried in her bones. Time didn't heal, but it taught her how to live with the ache. She found work where she could, doing the smallest of tasks for the smallest of pay. She swept floors, washed dishes, emptied trash. Work that demanded no questions, no expectations, no gaze upon her eyes to guess at the story inside. She learned to make herself small, unobtrusive, like a shadow cast in dim light. Then came the offer, not a job she dreamed of, not one that felt like freedom, but a job that needed doing. A wealthy family in the hills looking for help with cleaning, upkeep, someone to dust and polish marble halls and silk drapes, to make the corridors gleam. Many applicants asked for high wages, for benefits, for days off. She asked only to be chosen. It didn't matter where the work was, so long as it gave her a place to sleep and bread to eat. The mansion stood isolated, perched on a rise, stone walls catching the sun in pale shades of gold. A long driveway wound through aged oaks whose leaves whispered secrets to the wind. When she arrived for her first day, the sky was clear, each breath leaving a mist that danced and faded. The housekeeper greeted her, tall, elegant, eyes like cold steel, but offered a curt nod rather than warmth. "We start at dawn," she said, "and finish when the work is done." Her uniform was pressed, simple, but carrying the emblem of a family whose wealth was whispered about in town. Rumors swirled that the mansion held artifacts, paintings of great value, and treasures collected across the world. Rumors of secrets hidden in locked rooms where daylight never entered. For a woman like her, whose life had known only loss and loneliness, the mansion felt like a labyrinth of echoes waiting to test her. Days passed, each one similar. Rise before sun, tidy the libraries, dust the chandeliers, polish silver until the reflection seemed alive. She moved through halls sometimes so silent she could hear her own breath, sometimes so quiet it felt like the walls watched her, waiting. She learned the patterns of the place, how the morning sun traveled across the marble floors, where cobwebs gathered and were dusted like a timid animal. One morning, toward the end of her second month, she was in the West Wing, cleaning a study filled with tall shelves and ancient books. Her cloth glided along the surface of a grand desk when a voice, familiar, low, commanding, like something carved in the chambers of her past, made her freeze. The duster slipped from her hand and fell with a soft thud. Anna. Her name, breathed like a ghost. The world around her seemed to pause, the sunlight suspended midair, the dust motes hanging like stars frozen in the void. She turned slowly, her heart pounding like distant thunder. There, at the threshold, stood a man. Taller than she remembered, yet the same, familiar in every sharp angle of his face, the set of his shoulders, the way his eyes carried a storm she knew well. It was him. Her breath caught. Her knees threatened to give way. The years of sorrow, of silent tears shed in darkened rooms, of imagining his voice until it blended with her nightmares, it was him. Not a memory, not a figment, but present, alive, standing in the doorway of that grand study. He looked at her with astonishment, confusion, and something that trembled in his gaze, soft and unguarded. "Anna," he said again, as if speaking her name could root him back in reality. No one had called her by her name in years. Not since that day at the cemetery, when the world had closed in around her and swallowed her voice whole. She wanted to speak, to ask 1,000 questions in one breath. How? Why? Where have you been? Why didn't you come back? But her voice was gone. Only tears came, slow at first, then cascading down her cheeks like a river breaking through a dam. He took a step forward, as if uncertain whether she was a vision or a truth. "Don't be afraid," he whispered. His voice was the same voice she had heard in her dreams, the voice that had drawn her back to longing when she thought longing had died. She stood still, unsure whether to run toward him or away from the danger of hope. "I thought you were dead," she finally whispered. The words were heavy, like chains dragged from the bottom of a sea. He closed his eyes, and when they opened again, they held regret and something more, anguish. "I'm so sorry," he said. "I never meant for you to suffer. It was never supposed to be like this. Haven't I suffered enough?" She whispered back, her voice cracking. He stepped closer, eyes locked on hers. "I need to tell you everything," he said. "Please. Let me explain." For a moment, time itself seemed to hold its breath. The mansion's grand clocks ticked somewhere distant, but to Anna it sounded like the heartbeat of fate itself, urging her forward. She looked at him, the man she thought she had lost, the man whose funeral she had been torn from, the man whose memory had molded the story of her grief, and she felt the first flicker of something she had not felt in years, hope. A trembling breath escaped her lips. "Then tell me," she said softly. He nodded, his gaze unwavering. "But first," he said, "let us sit. There is much you should know." In the warmth of that vast study, with sunlight brushing the spines of old books and dust motes drifting in golden light, they sat a day. And he spoke, of wars that stole him from her, of missions and captors, of wounds and escapes, of every night he had searched for a way home. His voice faltered and faltered again under the weight of the years they had lost. Anna listened, her heart 1,000 jagged pieces that somehow fit together as he spoke. When he finished, silence settled between them like a soft cloth laid gently across broken things. She looked at him, the truth of his words now settling in her mind like seeds in fertile soil. "I lived," he said. "But I was lost. Every day I was lost." She reached out and touched his hand, her fingers trembling. "And I waited," she said simply. He stared at her, his eyes glistening with unspoken emotion. "You waited," he repeated, as though tasting the sweetness and cruelty of those words. Outside the study, the world went on. The mansion buzzed with servants and duties yet to be done. Inside, two hearts that had once been torn apart beat again in fragile, hopeful harmony. And although the road ahead was uncertain, Anna knew one thing with the clarity of dawn breaking through a long winter night. Love, once found, refuses to be buried forever. Days turned into weeks, but Anna hardly noticed the passage of time. Each morning, she rose with a strange lightness in her chest, a feeling she hadn't known for years. The mansion, once cold and imposing, began to feel less like a labyrinth of shadows and more like a stage set for something entirely unexpected, a place where hope could breathe again. She moved through the corridors with a new rhythm, her eyes scanning the halls for signs of him, listening for the familiar cadence of his voice. And he was there. Always there. Not as a fleeting shadow, but as a tangible presence, filling the space around her with warmth and life. He showed her the hidden rooms, the old letters tucked in drawers, photographs of distant lands where he had traveled in those lost years. Each story he told was a thread that wove him back into the fabric of her life, and each thread mended some invisible tear in her heart. She found herself laughing quietly at his small, human moments, a hand trembling as he held a cup of tea, a laugh that started in his chest and spilled out like sunlight, the way he flinched at sudden noises, a reminder that even heroes carried fragility inside them. Yet the weight of lost years lingered. Some nights, when the house was silent and the moonlight painted silver lines across the floor, Anna would wake with a sudden pang, remembering the grave she had been torn from, the ceremony she had been forbidden to attend. She would touch the scar on her own wrist, a faint mark left by grief, and whisper into the darkness, "I waited for you. I waited all this time." And somewhere, across the room, he would stir in his sleep, reaching subconsciously toward her, as if even in dreams they could not escape the gravity of their bond. One evening, they walked through the gardens, the air thick with the scent of winter roses, a hint of frost clinging to petals and leaves. He held her hand gently, as though he feared she might vanish if he gripped too tightly. The world seemed still, hushed by the anticipation of reconciliation, and Anna felt the years of loneliness dissolve into the cold earth beneath her feet. "I never stopped thinking of you," he said softly, his breath visible in the crisp night air. "Every day, I imagined coming back, imagined your face, imagined this moment, and yet I failed to reach you." Tears welled in Anna's eyes, a mixture of sorrow and relief. "You're here now," she whispered, "and that is all that matters." He shook his head slowly, as if he could not yet believe it himself. "No," he said, voice trembling. "It is not all. I have to make up for the time I stole from you. I have to show you that life can still be beautiful, even after the years we lost." They spent the following months slowly rediscovering each other. Simple moments carried weight, breakfast shared in the sunlit kitchen, evenings reading by the fire, walking through the halls whispering secrets they had once thought lost forever. Each laugh, each touch, each glance became a testament to endurance, a quiet rebellion against the cruelty of fate. Anna returned to the cemetery one day, after a long silence, to place flowers at the grave he should have lain in, to speak to the memory of sorrow that had dominated her youth. She knelt, placing her hand on the cold stone, and spoke aloud. "I forgive you, life. I forgive the years I had to endure. And I thank you, because he is here now. He is here, and we are together." The wind stirred gently, carrying her words like a benediction. When she returned to the mansion, he was waiting at the door, a question in his eyes, a quiet hope. And Anna knew, without hesitation, that nothing could undo the years they had reclaimed. They had survived the cruelty of separation, the weight of unspoken grief, the shadows of what might have been. Together, they could face what remained, every challenge, every joy, every ordinary day made extraordinary simply because they had each other. In the quiet of their shared nights, they sometimes spoke of dreams, the future, children, travels to distant lands, lives yet unwritten. And though the memory of loss lingered like a faint echo, it no longer held power over them. It had shaped them, yes, but it had not destroyed them. Their love was not fragile, it was forged in endurance, in patience, in the long, bitter winters of the soul. And as Anna rested her head against his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart, she realized that true reunion was more than seeing someone again. It was knowing, with unshakable certainty, that no matter what the world threw at them, they would face it side by side. The mansion, once a symbol of cold grandeur, had transformed. Its corridors now echoed with laughter and whispered confessions, the libraries with soft rustlings of pages turned together. Every room held a memory of renewal, every window a reflection of possibility. And outside, the gardens bloomed again with the arrival of spring, as if the earth itself rejoiced in the triumph of hearts reunited. Anna and he walked through those gardens often, hands entwined, words unnecessary, because presence was enough. They spoke of the past in fragments, the memories of pain softened by the warmth of being together. Each day became a page, each moment a line, each touch a sentence in the story they would write anew. And through it all, one truth remained: love that survives death and years apart is stronger than any sorrow, brighter than any darkness, and eternal beyond the limits of time. Years passed, and the mansion that once felt like a cold labyrinth became a home filled with warmth, laughter, and the gentle rhythm of life shared. Anna and he moved through the seasons side by side, their bond deepening with each sunrise and sunset. Spring brought the scent of blooming roses and the soft hum of bees in the garden, and they often walked hand in hand among the petals, talking of dreams they had long postponed, of places they longed to see together, and of the simple joys that had eluded them in youth. Summer arrived with golden sunlight streaming through the tall windows, and children's laughter echoed through the halls, first small, tentative footsteps, then gleeful runs across the polished floors, as the family they had built grew and flourished. They became not just lovers reunited, but companions in every sense of the word. Morning coffee shared on the veranda became a ritual of connection. Evenings by the fire, reading stories aloud to their children, became a sacred time where the world outside fell away. Anna sometimes caught herself staring at him, marveling at how a man once torn from her life could now be her anchor in the storm and the calm, her past sorrow transformed into the bedrock of their happiness. He, in turn, admired the quiet strength she carried, the grace with which she met life's challenges, and the infinite patience that had allowed love to survive despite the cruel years apart. Time did not erase the memories of pain, but it softened them, weaving them into the fabric of who they were. On quiet nights, they would sit in the study, the same one where they had first been reunited, and speak softly of the days lost, not with bitterness but with reverence for the endurance that had brought them to this place. They told their children stories of courage and hope, of love that could not be extinguished, and the lessons of patience, resilience, and faith in the unseen became part of their family's legacy. Holidays were celebrated with warmth and abundance, the mansion alive with friends, laughter, music, and the aroma of familiar dishes. Evenings were spent in the gardens, where the wind carried the soft fragrance of flowers and the stars shimmered like distant promises kept. They celebrated birthdays, anniversaries, and milestones, each moment marked with gratitude for the simple truth that they had found each other again. Old letters and photographs, once relics of longing, were now cherished mementos of the journey they had endured. They framed them in the halls, a testament to survival, love, and the relentless passage of time that could separate and yet reunite. Visitors often remarked on the warmth that seemed to radiate from the house, unaware that the true magic was not in the walls, the gardens, or the opulent furnishings, but in the enduring hearts of two people who had refused to let life's cruelty dictate their story. And so life flowed onward, steady and gentle, filled with ordinary miracles, the laughter of children, the quiet moments before dawn, the comfort of a hand held tightly in the night, the shared glance across a crowded room that said everything without words. Anna and he grew old together, not as two broken souls, but as partners who had learned that love was not measured by the absence of hardship, but by the courage to hold on, to wait, and to embrace the future with open hearts. When the last winter came, gentle and calm, they sat together in the garden, hands intertwined, watching the first snow fall on the roses they had planted so many years before. Their children ran around, voices full of life and joy, unaware of the gravity of the years their parents had endured. Anna leaned her head on his shoulder and smiled, feeling the full circle of a life lived with depth and devotion. "We found each other again," she whispered, voice soft but unwavering. "Yes," he replied, his eyes reflecting the brilliance of countless shared dawns and dusks. "And nothing will ever take this from us." And in that moment, surrounded by family, love, and the quiet triumph of hearts that had endured, Anna and he understood a truth older than time itself. That love, once it finds its way, is eternal, resilient, and unbreakable. It carries the past gently, embraces the present fully, and lights the path to every tomorrow, bright and unyielding, until the end of days.